Good morning. Today I'm going to try to show you a little bit about customizing a pattern for your own cape dress. Hopefully I can get through these videos okay. I tried yesterday and I kept getting interrupted, so we'll go for it again. The type of pattern that you need to find is generally looks something like this. Hopefully you can see it okay. I believe the term is shirtwaist dress pattern, but basically it's a very simple dress pattern, and hopefully you can find it Walmart, Joann's, Hobby Lobby, just anywhere that you buy your patterns. It can have a lot of variations to it. It could be long sleeve, short sleeve, shorter, longer, whatever. You really only need the bodice. The skirt is basically a large rectangle, and you can cut that to the dimensions you want. So whatever length that it's pre-packaged doesn't really matter. But you just basically need your bodice. It can be raised up, like right there where your skirt's higher, more of an empire or an in-between. You probably don't want it to be a full empire like where it's under the breast, because that kind of can accentuate a little more than you might like for a modest pattern. Not that those patterns are immodest, but I think you probably have to be a little more careful with how you make them. What I do is I use a standard pattern my mom had printed out of a computer program a long time ago, and I've modified it over the years to be more specific for me. And I have raised the waist on it, so it's kind of in between a true empire and then a regular. Mine's just kind of about in there. I think that helps a lot if you're a person who is like me and has too much weight on them. It just balances the figure better. I don't really know how to describe it, but it just looks a little better. A lot of Mennonite cape dresses, and believe me, there are many variations from the different groups. There's no one thing that is a cape dress. You may see a front cape only, a front and back cape. You may see a cape that looks more like a shawl. So there's lots of versions out there. But a lot of them do have a more fitted waist, like with an elastic waist and then a belt over it. Sometimes people wear the belt for formal occasions, sometimes they wear it all the time. It just depends on the group. I don't really recommend the elastic waist and the belt for a person who's overweight. I just don't think it typically looks as modest as something with a looser waist. Personally, I would love to wear that other pattern, but I can't. It just doesn't look modest on somebody like me. So that's just a thought. And frankly, this type of pattern that doesn't have it is a little easier to sew anyway. You can gather or pleat your skirt onto your bodice. Doesn't matter, it's just whatever your preference is. So, but that gives you an idea of the basic type of store-bought pattern to look for. What you're going to do is, of course, you're going to cut it out. This is my particular copy. Remember, mine's custom, so there's a couple unusual things. Mine's got a curve here to follow the natural curve of my waist, and instead of having a straight side like your store-bought one's probably going to have, mine's slanted because my lower body is significantly bigger than my upper body. It's just the way the good Lord made me. Even when I was a thin person, I had a big difference in sizes. So your store-bought pattern is going to be straight on the sides, and I'll probably be straight on the bottom. So don't let that throw you off. But that's just your basic front bodice piece. And to get your cape piece, because that part obviously doesn't come with the store-bought pattern, it's actually very easy. Most likely you're only going to have half of this, and you're going to be cutting this part on the fold of your fabric. All you got to do to get your cape piece is just lay it over like that and cut that straight. You're going to have a little bit of curve right there probably. Just go straight up it, straighten it off. Very, very easy. That's all you got to do to get your front piece cape. Back piece is the exact same way. If you want a back cape. Now that said, there are several ways to do your dress. You can do front only, you can do back only. I typically do front only because it saves fabric. I just don't see a big need for the back cape. It's just up to you, but depending on whether you do front only or front and back is going to determine how you want to put it together. And believe me, there's going to be a lot of ways that you can put this thing together. There is no one right way, in my opinion. What I would recommend, I think most people are probably going to want a front and back cape because it's a little more traditional. I would recommend that when you go to sew this together, instead of, okay, where your store-bought pattern, it's going to have facings for your neckline, because to hem this under is very hard to do neatly, and frankly, I think even if you do it neatly, it's still not going to be as strong as something like a facing, or my preference is using bias tape to go around the edge and doing a bias neckline. I think it looks better, it's stronger, it's going to lay neater, it'll be a lot easier to sew. I don't really like using the facings the dress patterns have. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's a proper way to do it. They just irritate me when I wear it, especially when you got double layers. You got your cape layer and you got your under layer. So then you'd have double facings to deal with, and always trying to make sure they're laying nicely. To me, it's so much easier just to do bias. But that's up to you. You can buy your bias tape prepackaged, or you can make it. I typically make it. It's just cheap to do. But anyway, when you go to attach, say you're going to eliminate your facings, and if you're going to do a front cape and a back cape, there's a way you can do it without even using bias or trying to turn your neck. What you essentially are going to do, this is my little cape piece here, you're going to let your cape be a facing of sort. You're going to sew this, you know, right sides together, but you're going to sew it around the neck, and then you'll flip it, and then that by default, because you've got that double layer, that can act as your facing. But when you do that method, it's going to be easiest if you use a zipper in your shoulder seam as your closure. I see a lot of ladies out at the church that my husband and I visited do that, and you get by with a shorter, smaller zipper, which is also cheaper. Speaking of zippers, just a very quick tip. Again, oh, my camera has been falling. Sorry. Again, GVS is a much cheaper place to get your zippers. Zippers at Joann's are something in the neighborhood of $2 to $5, I think, per zipper. You can get them under $1 at GVS if you get with the bulk option. Go with bulk zippers, and so much cheaper. Let me put the camera back down here. Sorry about goofing the camera view up. My tripod is kind of on its last leg here. My little one's knocked it over a few times. Anyway, if you're going to do a front cape and a back cape, my recommendation for the way to put this together is sew your neck seams on your front cape first, attach the two necks of the front cape together, and then do your back cape. The back cape, you know, just your neck seam. Don't do anything else. And then, let me go through my notes here because I wrote this down because I didn't want to get goofed up. After you do just the necks, you're going to want to hem your sides of your cape. You know, both your front cape and back. Generally, most people tend to do that with a blind hemmer, but however you want to hem it is up to you. There's no right way. The next thing that you're going to want to do is then work on your shoulder seams. You'll want to do one side of it regular, sew it up, make sure you line everything neatly. And a big important thing is the whole time you're doing this, whatever seam, sorry camera, whatever seam allowance you do decide to use, so sorry, you're going to want to make sure you keep it absolutely consistent, because when you're attaching your shoulder seams together and your capes and stuff, you want everything to line up perfectly. It doesn't really matter. I mean, generally 5/8 is the standard seam allowance, but you know, if you want to use 1/2 inch, it really doesn't matter. Just keep consistent with whatever you use. But basically, then your last step is just to do your shoulder seams, and you do the one side, and then the other side you do the zipper, and you can put that on whatever side is most comfortable for you as you're, you know, putting your dress on and off. From there, it's just basically standard dress construction. I personally would go with doing the sleeves next. You, like on my pattern, you know, I've got the little marks to line things up, and you're going to have that on your commercial pattern. Just go with standard directions pretty much from there out once you have your cape done. Do your sleeves, then your side seams, and then at that point you're going to be doing your skirt and get your skirt prepared. Once you get your side seams on your skirt done, you're going to attach it to your bodice, whether you pleat it on or whether you gather it on. It doesn't matter. It's just truly your preference. What you will do though, because you've got this extra layer here, treat your front cape layer and your bodice front as one piece. And sometimes it helps before you start trying to gather your skirt onto this or pleat it onto it, that you maybe do a little basting stitch along the very bottom, maybe holding like a 1/4 inch seam allowance, something just to hold those two layers together so you're not fussing with them. That helps a lot. It's an extra little step, but it does this, I don't know, makes it a little easier to complete. But from there on out, it's this pretty standard dress construction. Hopefully this video has been helpful. I am sorry for the very poor quality and it bouncing all over the place, but if you have any more questions about the basics of modifying your own cape dress pattern, please let me know. There is that one book that I talk about in the video on resources that's GVS sells it, and so do various websites. It's a pretty cheap book to buy. It's what's it called, Light Unit, and it's from Christian Light Publishers. It's basically the topic of preparing a cape dress pattern and sewing your cape dress. Those would be helpful resources for you too. So, and I'll help you in any way I can. So hopefully that's helpful. Have a very blessed day.